Hello, World Civilization 107 class. Welcome to week 6. This is the last week before the final exam. And yeah, it came that quick. It threw me off. This is the nature of these accelerated courses, and you know, so here we are. Okay, so having said that, I'm going to talk a little bit about the content and the choices I've made for the module this week, but I know importantly and significantly for many of you, let's talk about late work in your grade situation. So, okay, some folks still didn't look at my last announcement that mentions that if you know, I said that after 8 hours after work is due, you could still just turn it in, just turn it in. But once it's past 8 hours of the due day, you need to communicate with me and ask for to turn in the late work, or I automatically reject it and you don't get points for it. That's the rule. There's some other folks that I've made arrangements with, okay, for late work, but now we're at a critical time, okay? So for those I've made arrangements for late work, um, you cannot turn it in later than this Sunday, okay? This upcoming Sunday. And because I need time to build a grade everything and get your finals put together and uh and I have a lot of folks that usually try to contact me wanting to do some last minute hurdle. Trying to fix your life at the last week is not the recommendation. Okay, I will work with you, but I can only take so much late work in, and it depends on how many students I have that are in the situation that I'm communicating with. So this is why we're going to have to negotiate some things. Okay, I'm not mad at and I'm not judging. So I want you to contact me and know, like, I'm sympathetic towards things. I have a second job. I've contemplated a third job. The economy is what it is. It's not easy. And so, and if you have a family life in particular, a love life, a friend life, I mean, what do you know, and you do need the time for those things. So, um, no judgment. We just need to come up with a strategy right now. We just need to talk about that. And I want to help you with it, but you got to communicate with me and you got to do it this week. And I'd advise in this next 3 days, I don't work for these 3 days at another job. But so like maybe, texting me during business hours, or maybe we can make a phone call. I could set up some Zoom. You can come for Zoom office hours. We'll figure out something. But you're gonna have to be proactive in communicating with me right now. So that's what's the important part. Okay, so please remember that. And right now is kind of like the do or die moment for the class. Okay, so all right. So having said that, um, quickly, I also just want to briefly mention some stuff about the material that I'm covering and the way that I'm covering it. I am diving into what's important to know about right now, but also a very contentious situation. I may have mentioned this in some other announcements talking about the Israel Palestine conflict, which is now spilled over into the US Israel war in Iran, which is also at this current moment more the United States dealing with Iran at the moment, and maybe some even ambiguity about the Israel US role with the war with Iran, which is actually affecting the global economy. Okay. Um, but then there's Israel Palestine conflict, which really destabilizes the region. And people have not cared about or have mightily strong opinions about. Okay. And so some people are going to look at the choices of the sources that I've made and the topics, and they're going to see a certain bias. Here's what I want to make very clear right now at this point in history. And I think I might have mentioned this in some other videos, but okay. 27 roughly years ago, yeah, yeah. Sometimes I'm off a year or two. I'm always trying to pin it down. I met a Jewish American man from the South who kind of mentored me. He had a PhD in history, and he was against segregation. He grew up in segregated South, and he thought that was awful, and that was what he fought against. And then he falls in love with a Palestinian woman later in life. Remember, he's a Jewish man raised in the United States, and through this relationship, he goes to Israel and he goes to the West Bank to see things for himself, what to make of what's going on. And he came back very critical of the treatment of Palestinians. And he exposed me to this, and there were actually quite a bit of Jewish Americans, well, I shouldn't say quite a bit, a handful that I met that had the same experience and were expressing the same things. And I went down this rabbit hole, and I had a lot of people challenging me on those ideas back then. I've been to many debates about this. I've been to synagogue on this. I've heard commentaries on at mosques, at churches, college campuses. Read over 20 books. I started writing lots of papers in college, and much of the resources that I've read are actually come from Israeli historians that are Jewish, that also kind of validated a lot of the things that I initially heard from my, well, I'll just say mentor, so to speak. And so for me, I've always tried to present this still in a very nuanced way, and I'm still trying to not like make it provide some sort of nuance. But sometimes there's just like a certain amount of evidence that comes your way that you have to like kind of really tell the story more straightforward, and it pushes the very nature of pushing out objective information looks biased because you're getting another set of ideas that are actually not backed up by a lot if you really start to research it. Let me give you an example where I take it to another conflict. I also teach the US Civil War. And let me confess, when I first started teaching it, I always knew the consensus view of historians was that the Civil War, that slavery was front and center of the Civil War. But I had one friend really challenge me on this and like say, okay, that's propaganda, and took a kind of sort of Southern position on it, that it wasn't, the slavery wasn't the fundamental aspect of it. So I listened to some PhDs and different people with alternative views. But as I researched it, I actually realized that it was more straightforward. I looked at the declarations of secession, and all of the Southern leaders were saying, no, we're leaving because of slavery. We're leaving the Union because of slavery. That's the fundamental thing that we're doing. This is what Alexander Stephens said in his cornerstone speech. And at this point of my life, I cannot teach the U.S. Civil War without saying that it was absolutely over slavery. That was the fundamental issue. The evidence is just too overwhelming, coming from the primary sources of the very people involved at the time. So that's where I'm at. Now, you can debate about a lot of other different things in that, and you know, but I'm just saying that's the evidence that I see. Okay, so um, the what I'm producing for you here is I'm looking at some of the primary sources that I'm having you look at. Having you look at certain things that are coming. I have an article that seems quite wild, the Lavon affair. Well, it's coming from the IDF's own archives. Okay, so it sounds like a conspiracy theory, but then it's coming right from the Israeli Defense Force archives. And I tried to research to make sure this wasn't a fake archive. You know, on the internet, you got to be careful with everything, and I'm aware of that. But I also researched this topic in other sources and in Israeli press, and that's true. So there's a lot of things that I've looked at, and so that's all I really want to say about it. I am totally open to having a debate about this if you're seeing something that seems like it's not provable or problematic, and your grade's not going to be at risk. I'm not going to, you know, this part is fair. And so I just want to say that. And so I want to then again though go to the discussion and kind of the spirit of where I'm at with this. In case you haven't noticed, what I'm saying is that I had this position I learned from a Jewish perspective from friends. My friends are Palestinian. I've made many Palestinian friends now, and I've heard their story. I have Jewish friends. I went to a demonstration in the past with an Israeli gentleman who would be defined as a Sabra. Um, I am not promoting an attack on the essentialization of somebody's ethnicity, religion, or culture. There are people who look at the world, they look at ideologies, and you look at history, and you take a position, and sometimes you're with the majority, and sometimes you're against. Okay. And for me, this is about taking moral and objective decisions based on history and understanding, than promoting like let's hate one group over the other. That's the opposite direction of what I'm trying to go with here. Even though I'm making a pretty strong critique, as you will see. So I'm not compromising on that because I stand by my research that I've done over the years. But I am making it clear the overall messaging of what I'm talking about. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Now, look, on the Iran thing too, I know I'm already going longer on this than I wanted to, but a lot of my friends are Assyrians from Iran and some other friends from Iran that fled the Islamic Revolution. And to say that they hate the Islamic Republic is putting it lightly. It's such a sensitive matter that I actually had a friend, that I'm pretty sure she deleted me off of social media because I simply said I don't think the US should go to war with Iran. And she was in the hopes that this would regime would be overthrown, I think. And I've seen this from my other friend, and I've seen what their posts and arguments that are going on that I actually stayed out of on the internet. Okay. Um, and so there's a sensitivity, and I want you everybody else to keep that in mind. Uh, uh, but I think the content, you know, a lot of folks I know are very pro Shah. The Shah was overthrown in a revolution, not a coup. That's an objective fact. And so what it means is out of like the millions of people, like over 90 million people in Iran, people have different opinions. Just like think about the politics of Hillmar, California versus the politics of San Francisco. Think about the politics of Santa Cruz versus Alabama. So when everybody's opinions are valid and people come from areas where a lot of people have the same opinion, but when you have large countries sometimes telling, is Trump popular or is he not popular? He did right. In other words, depending on where you go in the country, it varies wildly, right? Um, some people loved Obama, other people hated Obama, and we're talking again about regions, towns, and there's reasons for that. So please keep that in mind. Also, what I'm saying, I'm so I think you get the overall point of what I'm trying with all my caveats about the information in here. I also wish I could have covered more things. There's a lot of stuff that I'm leaving out. I'm hoping at the very least, I mean, if you're involved in studying these things and you have some strong opinions, at least you have strong opinions and now you're engaged in some very important topics. These are the topics right now. Israel Palestine, US war, US Israel war on Iran. These are the topics, okay? Can't escape them. And just keep in mind the last speaker, and this is where I'll end it, Dr. Pape. He has been studying military, like he teaches military, people in the United States government that are studying military theories and bombing campaigns and terrorism and all that stuff. He's a guy that's been doing that for years. He's worked for Republican and Democratic governments. So the last guy that talks about the escalation trap, he's all over the place these days. He has been somebody who is saying a lot of things that might shock you, but he's somebody who considers himself a realist and is basically pointing out that Iran is winning right now. And you'll just take a look and see why and what is being said there. But I just wanted you to know his background and understand that part of it. So, look, crazy times we're living in here. I hope, though, that this history will have proven to have helped you ground yourself in whatever positions you take. And we'll be in touch.